Does capitalism take advantage of the working class, blue collar individuals? This is a common criticism that has become widely used in recent times, and I'm going to take a look at it closer on this week's Tuesday treesPhilosophies right about now. Welcome to Tuesday treesPhilosophies. This is where I go deeper on philosophies, values, things happening in pop culture, whatever. People always tell me I go too deep. Well, I go deeper, baby. Anyways, let's get into it. So this question has been coming up more and more frequently recently, and that is, does capitalism take advantage of working class, blue-collar individuals, your everyday common Joe that's going to work 9 to 5, grinding away? Capitalism is taking advantage of those people. And oftentimes, an example that is used to illustrate this is when we look at giant multinational corporations that started initially with their manufacturing warehouses based out of North America or Western Europe, for example, in US, Canada, wherever. And eventually, in order to cut down on costs, right, cut down expenses, they're taking care of their bottom line, they realized, hey, we can move our manufacturing into offshore locations, to China, to India, Bangladesh, whatever, so on and so forth, where they can pay those laborers a cheaper hourly wage for the work that they're doing. So people will point to this and say, oh, look, giant multinational corporations are taking advantage of everyday individuals, right? They're making huge profits, but meanwhile, these people are being paid pennies for their work per hour. And they'll end the thought at this point. But I think it's very important to continue this thought and move it forward, because it's disingenuous to stop it at this point, because there are certain things at play here which are not mentioned, right? And what that ties into is a different way of looking at capitalism, which is that capitalism allows people, individuals, to exchange their labor for a price that they deem worthy of it. So what does that mean? That means that in a capitalist system, somebody that is working a job that they deem is not paying them an equivalent amount for the value that they are bringing or the value that they're capable of, they can take that labor, they can take themselves and find another job, do something else that they believe will be of a higher value return for what they are able to put out. So it's a slightly different way of looking at things. Instead of looking at it from the point of view of people being taken advantage of by big corporations, rather capitalism is allowing people to exchange their labor for an equivalent price. So what's happening in these countries? What is happening in these countries where these people are being taken advantage of? There is 100% of the time a lack of capitalism. They don't have capitalism in these countries that are being taken advantage of for their cheap labor. So what does that mean? That means these people have no choice. They don't have the choice to move their labor to a different place that they feel will give them a higher value return for what they value is that they are bringing. So because of the fact that these people have no choice due to the lack of capitalism, they are de facto part of a system that pays them pennies per hour. Now, let me say that again. It's the lack of capitalism. It's actually the lack of capitalism in these systems that is leading to people not being able to be paid a fair living wage. So what we in fact need is more capitalism. We need more capitalism in these countries, not less. We need more capitalism, because that way people will be able to provide opportunities. Businesses will be able to provide opportunities, and actually maybe some company will pop up and say, hey, we're able to pay you guys more. Come over here. And then as a worker from that one company that's not being paid as much, you see that and say, hey, why don't I take my labor? Again, you have the option of taking your labor, which is the good or value that's up for exchange, and take that labor elsewhere where you feel that you'll be paid a better value for it. Now, that is the power of capitalism. It's a voluntary exchange. That's what people forget. That's a more general idea of capitalism, that it's a voluntary exchange of goods and services based on the value that we deem is worthy of those goods and services. So what does that mean? That means that labor that we're providing, that is a service, and the market tells us what the value of that service is. And how does that value come? Well, the market is actually based on everyone. That's one of the another beauties of capitalism, which I'll get into another video. I don't want to get it off on a side tangent, but it's us that is the market that decides the value of these goods and services, which is a very different way from looking at capitalism than is typically told, where it's all about greed and taking advantage of the lower working class. So again, I want to bring an example actually of this fact where there's no choice. And due to the fact there's no choice, people had suffered for a very long time. And that's something that's close home to me in my own homeland where I was born in Armenia. For the longest time, it was part of the Soviet Union. After it had collapsed, there was a series of corrupt presidents that took over. And they essentially had a close circle of people, an oligarchy, amongst which the market was divided to. So the president gave sections and sections of the market to his friends. So for example, if you wanted to get into the paper business, if you wanted to bring in paper into the country, there was one guy that brought in paper. You didn't have any options. You had one guy. Or metal. If it was metal, you wanted to bring metal to the country, there was one guy. And if you were somebody that wanted to come in and say, hey, I have a better way of bringing paper in that's actually going to be cheaper, you couldn't do that. You couldn't set up shop because it was in the hands of a select few. Now, that is the essence of oligarchy, where there's no choice. That is the essence of the lack of capitalism. People have no choice. And by virtue of people not having a choice, the country and economy suffered for many years. I mean, that's just one small element of it. There's many more factors, but that's one huge part. And now that the corrupt president and his system has been slowly rooted out because there was a revolution, now the market is being opened up. People are free to actually start up businesses where before they didn't have the opportunity to start business and start competition because those industries, again, were in the hands of select few people. If you wanted to bring in paper, it was one guy. If you wanted to bring in metal, it was one guy. You couldn't set up shop. It was squeezed. People's lives were squeezed out of them. So post-revolution, now we have more capitalism. Countries flourishing, more capitalism. I mean, it's really that simple. And another example, when we look at it, the biggest of all, is China. For the longest time, China was struggling. Then what do? They brought more capitalism into the country, and now they've risen into a global powerhouse. Not because of the communism, it's because they brought in and adopted more capitalism. They started playing ball in their own weird way of doing it. They started to play ball because that's what capitalism does. It brings everybody richer. So again, I want to tie this back in where capitalism, does it take advantage of people's of laborers, of working class? No, it's the lack of capitalism, the lack of opportunity, the lack of the ability for me as a worker to move shop, to go from my current work that's mistreating me to another work that's going to be better. That's where the true capitalism lies, in the option. And in these countries where people are suffering and our labor has been outsourced, that is where they don't have option. They do not have the options, and therefore the system that has been set up can afford to pay them a cheaper wage. I think it's really important for us to have these conversations about capitalism, and I'm going to go deeper on various aspects of it. So if you have questions about capitalism, please send it my way. I'm by no means an expert, but I do want to advocate for why it's an important thing to understand, because there is a lot of misleading information where simple straw man arguments are placed that try to demonize the system without truly understanding it. So I want to answer any questions you might have. If there's something about this video that you didn't understand, please let me know, and I'll be happy to answer in the comments. But that's this Tuesday, Trees Philosophies, and I'll catch you guys next week. Peace.